Hey everyone, and welcome to today's show on Wealth Strategy Secrets. Today we are joined by a very special guest, Gary Mottershead. With his background in manufacturing and chemical engineering, Gary believes it's important for specialists to consider themselves entrepreneurs first. In 1999, Gary founded GCP Industrial Products, which has grown to become the largest importer of sheet rubber into North America. Today has become a forward-thinking, digital-first, inspired industry leader. GCP sources materials from various countries around the world and was one of the first to make inroads into China. Gary has also been a strategic coach client for over 30 years, an associate coach for over 25, and he and his wife are proud grandparents and the parents of two entrepreneurial grown children. Gary, I'm so grateful to have you here today and let our listeners know who my personal coach is and expose them to some of the wonderful ideas that I've had the fortune of listening to you for the past 4 years to help me grow on my path and journey. So Gary, welcome to the show.
Dave, thank you so much. I always get excited and a little bit nervous when someone reads those things about me because I never think about it that way. But I got a little shivers. So I hope we can live up to it. But I'm delighted to be with you. I'm delighted you're putting this message out to your audience, and let's give them everything we've got today.
Okay, excellent, Gary. So let's take that momentum and propel us forward. Tell us a little bit about your background and journey. I mean, how did you start your business? How did you start your venture into entrepreneurialism? Where did it begin for you?
Wow. Yeah, I have to go back before GCP Industrial Products in 1999. Background is I'm a chemical engineer. I also have a master's of business administration. And I spent the first from 15 to 25 doing all sort of technical things. And then as I came out of that, I got to work for DuPont and into industrial sales. And I realized the world was going to be about people. So I kind of flipped my head around. I enjoyed being in sales, always had been into the technical side of things. But I found even then, I always pushed the boundaries. Even though I was working for DuPont in Canada, I worked with the United States a lot. And I was getting them to make products for me they'd make for nobody else in the world. Now, Canada's 1/10 the market that is the United States. And they wonder, why are we doing this for you? I said, because the customer needs it, And I didn't realize back then that I always pushed those boundaries. And I always tried to do things that I felt were in the interest of the client, interest of the customer, but that wasn't really being done. So consequently, Dave, you'd probably guess that I was not a good team player. I didn't fit the mold anywhere. And as a result, they always gave me the most difficult challenges because I would take those on. But that led me, after being there for a number of years, saying, I don't see myself, I don't see the path, I don't see myself being in that world. And so I stepped out, did a couple of other ventures with some friends, and then found myself really on my own with a young family. And my second child just being born. And somehow I got it into my head I'd start a tire recycling business. And not just any tire recycling business. It had to be done the way nobody else had done it before. Of course, nobody had been successful before. And using liquid nitrogen to freeze the tires became a cryogenic system. Recovery technologies began in 1989, just shortly after our daughter was born. And that was the toughest thing I ever did in my life. Did that for 8 years. We pioneered it all the way through. We sold a number of units around the world. And when my partners decided that we needed to get out of this and we sold it, we got bought by another company. And I looked at that point and said, well, they gave me a 3-year contract. Nice contract, nice, salary, whatever, for 3 years. And I just turned to my wife and I said, I'm going to be here 6 months or we'll make it the full 3 years. Well, 8 months later, I was gone out the door because I didn't fit. I didn't fit into the mold and everything else. And so I found myself, this is a quick one, found myself in my mid to late 40s and saying, I got to start all over again. And so literally with 2 kids and the mortgage and the cars and all that stuff and no income, I just started to do some work with Strategic Coach and doing a little bit of that. I said, I got to start over. And, and I look back on it, another real tough time in my life, but probably the best thing that ever happened because I had all that learning. And as you know, the mark of an entrepreneur is not how many times they get knocked down, but how many times they get back up. So this was another time for me to get back up. And so that led us to GCP. There's a lot more in there, but that's kind of the story that got us to where you started off with today.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And so what got you into coaching from there? What was your first inclination to get into coaching?
Well, it's kind of funny because when we all go back and look at our life, and I always love the word history, because history I is to me short form for his story, and not being gender sensitive here, but it's our story. And so we always go and create the story. Why are there so many stories about the wars and the Second World War and other things that people go back? Because they all have it from their own perspective. So when I got into the tire recycling business, I realized that I was on my own. And I'd worked with DuPont, as I mentioned earlier. And so I had the training. I got to do the Xerox selling and professional selling and all those other skills and people around you. And now you're suddenly on your own. So what do you do when you're on your own? And you know what? We're not good on our own as people. We've learned that over the last couple of years through all these lockdowns that we've been through, the challenges that people have gone through. We're not great. We're much better when we can work with others, either cooperate, collaborate, whichever the expression you want to be, learn from. And so I went to, I was at that's a kind of an interesting story, as I was at a Christmas party for Imperial Oil with my wife. My wife was a EA for the senior executives. And this was in December of 1990. And I was there, and the way those parties set up, I think they were obligatory, I'll call it, so that the executive had to invite all their assistants to come. Well, the executives and their wives were all in one room or whatever, and all the assistants and their spouses, whatever, were in another room. So one of the others, EAs there, and I still remember his name, a guy named Michael Feinsilver, and came up to me and says, "Gary, you're an entrepreneur. You need to be in strategic coach." What's that? I had no idea. And so I went to a presentation in April of 91, and I sat in that room with Dan and said, "This guy's crazy or he's brilliant." I said, and I said, because he's the only other guy that I think like him, or he thinks like me. And so I said, well, if that's the case, I think I better jump into this program. And so I joined in November of 1991, purely out of the fact that at that, the great part was, Dave, at that point, they'd accept anybody. Now we have income levels and everything else. And I said, I could get in when they had what they call the fog test. You know what the fog test is? You put the mirror under your nose, and if it fogs up when you breathe, okay, we got you, you're in.
We got you.
They said, oh, how much money do you make? Oh, it doesn't matter. Just if you can pay the dues, in you go. So I got in, and I stayed in because I felt that, from Strategic Coach you're part of and where we met, is Dan committed to do three things for us. Back at that time, he said, I'll keep you out front of what's going on in the world. He says, I'll package the material in such a way that you can utilize it, and I'll bring you something new every quarter. And I said, okay, I like the promises. You can see it was how important it was more than 30 years ago. And Dan has kept that promise, and Dan has kept that to us. Every workshop you come to, we have something new that's out front that keeps you going. And to me, as entrepreneurs, we can't stand still. We have to keep moving. The momentum is what we bring to the table. And so and I love that. And I said, as long as Dan does that, I'll stay. So spin it forward a couple of years, and then they wanted to grow. And so instead of putting just a few people in the room, they started putting 20, 30, 40 people in the room. And then they needed more people to support them. So I got asked if I would sit at a table and be kind of associate coach or whatever, or facilitator at a table. And then I'm up front one day in Chicago, and Dan turns around to me and goes, oh, comes up and he says, how would you like to be a coach? Me, I'm game for just about anything. What would it be like to be on the other side of the table? Okay, yeah. All right. And then thank goodness they didn't have a full application program, and one where they had to screen you all. I kind of got in early on. I got to get in early. I don't know if I'd make the criteria.
Right.
But anyway, and I got in to do that, and because I'd always thought about that. So my point about history is, now I said, I'm going to stand up in front of all the people that I've been sitting with. How can I justify to myself that I'm going to do that? And then I went back through my life and said, when have I done this? And I realized that if I looked my life in a different perspective, which I hopefully is important for everybody to do that, how can you do what you do? Well, I started coaching people and advising people when I was 17. And I can still remember, I can still see sitting downstairs in the little corner where we had our phone talking to this young guy who was the son of a Baptist minister. And I realized right away early on from him that all he wanted to do was suck my time. And I said, okay, now I can only help people who want to be helped. And I went through my life. What had I done? What had I done? Not being paid for any of this, and realized, okay, it was really about building confidence, is that I can do this. I've been doing this for a long time. I just never looked at it in that perspective. So that's really how it got started, and what allowed me to go without being way too nervous as I probably should have been when I started out.
Yeah. No, that's fantastic, Gary. And I mean, for me, this has been my 4th year with Strategic Coach and working with you, which has been absolutely phenomenal. And when it all started for me was when I actually heard Dan Sullivan on a podcast, because I was always looking to, learn and try to expand my network as well. And he asked a question, which I still think to this day, when I've been asked the question myself, right, which frankly is what coaching is all about, right? It's asking the right questions. Is, what is your DOS? Dan asked the DOS question. So dangers, opportunities, and strengths. And maybe you can share with the audience the DOS, the format of the DOS, and ask the audience that question because it's just so powerful, all the dimensions of it.
Yeah, it is, Dave, and it's really fundamental and a cornerstone. And the additive to that piece is what we call the R factor question, which R stands for relationship. And there's a really interesting, I'll ask you a question. I'm sure you've had friends for a long time, right? People have been good friends of yours, personal friends of you for a long time. I'll ask this question to you. Do you know more about their past than their future?
No.
Do you know more about their future than their past?
Yes.
Perfect.
Yes.
You're one of the unique ones, because most of us really only know the past about our friends, and we haven't asked them about what they think about the future.
Yeah, well, I focus very hard on future-based relationships, growth-oriented relationships.
And that's so important. So that's where the DOS comes in, because the DOS stands for dangers, opportunities, and strengths, but not ours. It's the dangers and the fears that our friends or our clients might have, prospects would have. And then the second part is opportunities. And the opportunity is what gives them excitement, because that's what they get driven for. And the third one, which is strengths, is really very important, because it's about what brings them confidence. And if you think about it, it's really their operating system, because people want to go away from dangers. They want to try and capture their opportunities. And being a good friend and having a good relationship is we actually complement other people's strengths. And so that's the key part about that is, and as you pointed out, which I'm really thrilled to hear from you, is that you focus on the future-based relationships. So you have to ask those questions, because the reason why people know more about the past, because it already exists. You can see it, you know it, you can touch it, whatever. But the future you can't, because the future doesn't exist yet. That just exists in our minds. But it's what drives us in the directions that we want to go in, whether it's from a financial perspective, whether it's a family perspective, whether it's a business perspective. That's what we're driven by, what the future is. We have momentum from the past, but we're driven by where we're going in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And can you shed some light as well? So we talked about strengths being a key component of how you're able to seize your opportunities and really mitigate some of those dangers. And what I've found that's also so powerful and part of really the framework we've built around this holistic wealth strategy, and it's kind of the cornerstone in our book as well, is this all starts with you, right? The person. So you have to have a vision for yourself, for your family, and then you have to create the right mindset, right, to be able to achieve these things. And I think part of that is this unique ability concept, which was definitely new to me. I mean, I had done, plenty of things like Myers-Briggs and those types of assessments, but nothing was so insightful as unique ability and understanding, your co-native wiring and what works. So can you help kind of elaborate on what unique ability really is and how you can leverage that?
Yeah. And as I do that, let me ask you this question, because you brought it up and what it meant for you, because it's really important what your experience is for others. Is what was it about unique ability that has meant so much to you? What are the one or two things that have meant so much to you, Dave?
It's the fact that I can double down on my strengths. I've given myself permission to double down on my strengths and let go of my weaknesses and have other people fill in the weaknesses.
Absolutely. And you know what if you think about all of us, we've gone through all the schooling systems, and if you've worked for a big company and you go through any reviews, everybody says to you what you've done wrong. And then they say, well, why don't you go work on your weaknesses? Well, in the concept of strategic coach unique ability, if we work on our weaknesses, we get strong weaknesses. We don't get any further ahead. And so we're always put at a point of disadvantage, I'll call it. We're never in a point of confidence. We're always in a point of, I want to say, a scarcity, a lack of something, because it's something that we don't have. Oh, I wish I had his, I wish I was this size. I wish I could do that thing. I wish I was capable of something else, because we always get measured to somebody else. When we measure ourselves to ourselves, what our strengths are, and as you recognize, that's what unique ability is. It's things that we do uniquely well that others don't. And the great part about that is we appreciate for each other on a unconscious or subconscious level. We appreciate each other for what they do, for who they are, what they're good at, but we never talk about it. And if you even think about it, the whole school system trained us this way. If I don't know if you,
for sure.
Because
for sure.
If
it's outdated.
It's a crazy thing. Is that in school you start with 100%. And you lose marks, right? You remember? Can you think?
Oh,
Can you think back a report and going, I lost marks for spelling, I lost marks for grammar, I lost marks for this.
Very true.
Well, the concept is we started with 100. You know why? Online gaming, and everything has been so popular with the kids. Do you know where do you start?
Because of the scoring. You start with 0.
You start with 0,
and then you move up.
You move up. So you move up by achievement, and so we are. Why is it addictive? Because we're achieving something. It's, we think it's bad that everybody's using that time, but we're actually teaching people how to go and achieve based upon what their strengths are. And they may go to different games because that game may not work for them. And I used to think of this as bad, but I've really begun to look at this in an entirely different way, because I never fit the mold in the school system, by the way. My world was, what percentage do I need to get on to the next thing that I want to get to? And I would have worked to that level.
Yeah.
Because that got my ticket punched or my card checked or whatever it was. And I was constantly told that I was an underachiever. Yeah. Why? Because whose measurement system was it?
And under theirs, absolutely.
It's theirs, not mine, right? So I only worked to the level that I wanted to work to, not theirs, which totally negates what that system is set up for.
I'm not a fan.
No, I could tell. I could see it. You're not a fan. But the thing is, it really helped me, and I hope it really helped me deal with our children, because I kind of go, you know what? That wasn't the be all and end all. What do we need to do? What's the purpose of going through this that we get out of it? Anyway, coming back to your point about unique ability, I believe everybody has unique ability. And I believe that we can, if we work together and bring our unique strengths together, we are much stronger as a team, because everybody just works at what they're best at doing and what they enjoy doing.
100%, Gary. And I would say through my evolution of really understanding unique ability, and I think about it really all the time. And it is such a powerful concept, because it truly drives fulfillment in the way that you wouldn't have really thought, right? So one of our freedoms is having freedom of purpose, right? To do what it is you want to do. Well, if you're doing your unique ability, right, which is, I know you're at the 100% goal. My goal is to at least I'm trying to get to 90% of the things I do is all unique ability. But what's really insightful about this is not only are you good at doing that, it's the most energizing to you, and it comes naturally. So just think about those things that are non-unique abilities. So for me, it's like administrative type things, dealing with, bills in the mail, like some insurance bill or hospital bill, or, having to, troubleshoot some of those things. They're completely draining, and they take away all of your energy versus, things like this when we're center stage and having these kind of discussions, they're completely energizing, and you don't need that next cup of coffee, right?
Well, it's crazy because they think of entrepreneurs as really being very controlling. You know what? I don't sign a check, Dave. I don't look at the bank accounts, either personally or professionally. And people say, God, you're crazy. Why don't you do that? I don't know whatever goes out there, what's all going out. People have my authority with the bank to wire millions of dollars a year. Okay. And my expression is, if we run out of money, you're the one that's out of a job. I'm okay. So I just said, keeps it balanced.
Yeah.
But it's not the point that I don't care, because I do. What I do care is that they have the responsibility and the authority to look after it. And if you've given it to them, you really find out how well people work. But it also allows me to do what I'm best at.
Right.
And when we do what we're best at, there's as you say, a tremendous amount of energy.
Yeah. Energy, and then value that you can provide your clients, right, just goes up. You're always increasing your value. And I want to come back to what you said earlier as well about this unique ability, is the evolution of it. I think the beginning is really understanding yourself and your strengths and weaknesses and how you apply that. But really the evolution of that is graduating that into teams, and teams also being family. I can't, it's been so insightful. Like my daughter, as an example, she's 23, super high follow through. She's a high implementer as well. And it's so amazing when we have some kind of house project. It's like, I create the vision. She completely implements everything. And we have so much fun doing it, and we all work together. And we have a family of 6.
Wow.
So sometimes there can be too many cooks in the kitchen, right, doing some type of family project. But when you understand this unique ability and how people can work together, it becomes really seamless and so much more powerful with what your family can do. And on the same side, like I'm doing that with my team, right? And we're hiring people that our unique abilities are complementary. You're not just coming with experience, right? We're able to be much more congruent as a team.
Well, you brought up a really good point that companies are facing a great deal of right now and are going to face, which is people and how to motivate their people. Well, we motivate people by allowing them to do what they're best at. And I'm going to come, how do we get to that point? And I think there's a big difference between management and motivation. And I always look at management as getting people to do things that they really don't like to do and they're not good at. And motivating is just encouraging people to do more of what they already do well. So I totally believe in the motivation side. And even though our company is relatively small, we haven't lost anybody through all of this pandemic and lockdown timeframe. And that's very unusual. So, and I don't feel we always do a great job, but when other people from the outside look at us, Christine, who works with me, heads up HR for me and been on a few conferences, and they go, well, we don't need your hiring practices and everything else because we haven't lost anybody. And they go, wow, you must be doing something right if you haven't lost anybody. And that's the only way I know. Otherwise, we always feel, again, we still look at things we haven't done well. But I want to get back to, as people are listening, how do they figure out what the unique ability is? And it'd be great if you could go through a course and a program to do all that. And their strategic coach has books about that written by Julia Waller, does a fabulous job. But if people just begin to think about what they feel like when they're doing activities, and we call it 4 levels. Unique ability, as you said, you have energy before you start it. You have energy while you're doing it. You still have energy when you're finished, And for me, coaching is really one of those activities. And I can be up there all day. And you've had that experience with me a number of times over the last 4 years. And I didn't know that. Dan Sullivan saw that in me. And then the next is, and this is kind of, I call this really a trap, is the excellence. It's things we might have been trained for. I was trained as a chemical engineer. I could do it, Dave, but I'm just not, I'm reasonably good at it, but I had no passion for it. So what separates unique ability from excellent is the activity you bring passion. And people can tell when you have passion for something and when you don't. It's really clear. And then we start, now we go on the other half of the equation, what we're competent at. And when we're competent, no matter what we do, we never get any better. For some people, that might be the game of golf, but that's not what we're talking about here in this sense. But the thing is, from their own work standpoint, and so you continue to work hard at it, but you never really make any progress. So it's frustrating. And then the fourth one is what we call incompetent, and it's really just that it's so frustrating for you to do. You know you're not very good at it. You don't do a good job at it. You procrastinate to the very end before you do it, and you don't feel good about what's happening. And so what we want people to do is, and that's the 4 categories, but if we make it simple for them and say, just get a sense of when you're enjoying what you're doing and when you're not, when it's causing you frustration or when you're not, and make note of those things, make note of those activities, and begin to bring yourself more and more into the area of where you do well, and note how other people react to you when you're doing the things that you enjoy doing.
Yeah, that's so powerful, Gary. Really appreciate you sharing that and kind of creating that systematic way for people to think about it. And we will put links in the show notes to how you can take your Kolbe score, and also the book that Gary mentioned as well. Gary, let's transition now into really, let's kind of talk about this concept of overall wealth strategy, kind of from a holistic perspective. And also I really credit you for giving me some of the inspiration to actually write my book on the holistic wealth strategy. And in fact, that's a big win this year. We are rewriting it, working with the publisher Scribe Media and Tucker Max to put that out. So that is underway, but I appreciate that insight. And as we kind of talk about in that book, I really see this whole thing as really a journey. I mean, if you think back to things like Maslow's hierarchy, there's some other constructs of it, things like a journey to self-actualization, right? Because it's all really about, you're providing financial security you need for yourself and for your family. Once you move past that, you can start to, create impact and do different things. And we have an alternative approach as well. As I know there's a lot of financial planners in the coach community, but we kind of have an alternative approach that mostly focuses on private equity and some of these different types of strategies. But the strategy, again, is very holistic. So for instance, if you don't set your vision, if you don't have a target, you'll miss it every time, right? You know that one. And also things like health. I mean, how much would Steve Jobs have paid to solve his health problem and still be here today? Right? So you could have all the wealth in the world, right? But if you didn't have your health, you wouldn't get there. So it's really kind of this, overall mindset and kind of holistic concept. Do you have some type of, philosophy or overarching framework, you've used personally in your life?
You brought up a lot of things that I certainly have resonated with, and I always remember the Maslow hierarchy needs. And the thing is that I think we all have an opportunity to have impact, and the impact that we have, and I don't want us to be measuring to other people. I'm not going to measure myself to Bill Gates or Mark Zuckerberg or Elon Musk and the others, and Steve Jobs, who I had a great deal of respect for all of these people, because these are some incredible individuals that have done that, and the world is better for that. But you look at the impact that we have. Like for you, Dave, you said you've got there's 6 of you, so I presume there are 4 children in the family. What happens, what we do with our own children and how they go out into the world, to me, that's an immense source of pride for me. It was also, to me, the greatest responsibility that I felt that I took on in life by being a father. And I have 2 children, and I'm very proud of both of my children. And then if you think about all the other impact that can be having to others. So I just wanted to make that piece. But I want to share with you a little story that when I was starting over back in 1998, and I was driving down the highway one day. We just bought this chalet ski place north of Toronto. I didn't have any money. I wasn't working, but I committed to it. And I'm driving down. I said, what do I want to do in my life? I said, oh, I want to be involved in $1 billion worth of business. And I go, oh, that's crazy. I'm not doing anything, Dave. So what's million wasn't $1 billion. Sounds like a big number. Anyway, but I said, I don't have to have $1 billion company. What can I do to be involved with people and companies that would be $1 billion? And so what happened is, you would probably gather of that, the role that I played in strategic coach over 25 years, over more than 3,000 entrepreneurs in the other companies that I've coached, our own company. I stopped keeping track of that number, but I'm sure it's well in excess of that number, just because if I added what everybody else has done and where you've had an influence, and you kind of go, that's okay. I'm happy with that as an impact. And it really became clear to me one day when I'd started a small scholarship many years earlier down at the university I went to, and I went to engineering and business in both the same schools. And I started an award, not in my name, but I called it the Entrepreneurial Spirit Award. And I had a choice to put it in the business school, which was one of the top 3 in Canada, or into the engineering faculty. And I decided to put the engineering faculty because the business school, frankly, wasn't very entrepreneurial. They wanted people to come out and go into private equity and capital in the banks and Wall Street and Bay Street and all those things. So, but spin it forward a number of years, and now the university decided they were going to be all entrepreneurial. A little bit of an oxymoron, but that's what they were going to do. And they raised tons of money. So they were, instead of $1,000 or $2,000, they were $250,000, being thrown around. And I said, my program didn't mean anything. So I said, I want to give away all this money at once. Let's have an impact. Let's do it all at once. So I'm sitting with the alumni representative, a great lady, and having dinner one night. And I said, you know what? I want to shut this down. I want to shut down the beneficiary, the bursary, whatever they called it at that point. And I want to give it away. And she got so upset with me. And she said, I've never had anybody close this off. She says, don't you want to know that when somebody comes later on, that somebody, your legacy is, they got this Entrepreneurial Spirit Award given by you? And I turned to Virginia and I said, Virginia, I've started a couple of businesses. I've worked around the world. I have 2 great children and I've coached 3,000 entrepreneurs. I think I've got a good legacy. If I'm not making an impact here, I'm just not going to do it. And it was one of the best decisions I ever made, because I stopped thinking about that and putting my energy into something else where you could make a difference.
Yeah.
And so if there's a piece out of this, I'd say, don't worry about what everybody else does. Just worry about what you do, where you can make an impact and where it means something to you, whether in a charitable one, or whether even your customers. Who are the customers? Who are the people you want to work with? And go where you can make a difference and you have a passion for that.
Yeah. Absolutely. That's really sage advice, Gary. So I think that's a good segue into, why don't we talk about the 4 freedoms, right? Because I think this is, again, another really powerful concept. And I think sometimes people think of these maybe, one dimension at a time, right? But it is really a multiplier, right? When you look at freedom, and especially this is true for entrepreneurs, but, not only entrepreneurs, but I think for a lot of people, this will really resonate.
Yeah. I used to think it was really more appropriate to entrepreneurs, but I think it actually applies to all of us in certain degrees. So let me just express what it is that the freedom of time, freedom of money, freedom of relationship, and freedom of purpose. And why are those important? Well, particularly for entrepreneurs, the reason why we got to be where we are, because we were probably the proverbial square peg in a round hole, and we didn't fit anywhere. So we didn't want to be captive. So we had the energy and wanted to have time. Well, you need to have freedom of time to be able to generate money. But I also look at, if we generate money, we also get buy time. And buying time, as you said, by building your team, having that so you don't have to do all of the activities. And the other one that's important, as you also talked about, is relationships. Well, there are some people we just don't get along with. And that's okay, because other people can get along with them. And there are others that don't energize us, whether it's our clients or whether it's been friends over the years. And so do we want to be spending time, and energy in those relationships where we don't see a future? And going back to what you said early on, really important that you understand people's futures. So the R factor question that we ask about where they want to be in 3 years' time, R stands for relationships. So those are really important, because relationships can either drag you down or build you up. Same goes in a company. You want the people on your team who want to be part of that team, not just, as I say, I don't take any prisoners, and I don't want any passengers in our boat. They all got to be moving and rowing in the same direction. And then the 4th one is a little harder for people, but is their purpose. But we're all driven by our purpose. And I think the clearest way that I can bring it to people, if you've ever seen the Simon Sinek, either his book or a little video clip TED Talk that he did, I think maybe back in 2009, called Start With Why, is that people understand your why probably better than you do, and people buy into your why. And if your why is about them, how do I make them better? And I don't mind saying that my purpose is helping people and organizations grow. It's taken me a while to get to that point, but that's my purpose for you when you come into the coach workshop, for my family, for my team, for all of my clients, for all of my vendors. And it really makes life quite simple when your purpose in all aspects of your life is the same and you can fully devote to that. And so again, I do podcasts like I'm delighted to be on this podcast because can we help people grow? Can we help people think about their world in a way they hadn't thought about it so that they can be relieved of some of the stresses and apply their energy to having the time, having the freedom of time, money, and relationships, and ultimately to pursue their purpose.
Right. No, that's really well said. Yeah, I think for me, it was an evolution of, some of these different, thinking constructs that helped me to get to, my purpose. And I still have my notes, Gary, from this, 4 years ago when I was answering the DOS question, on a good thinking day. And one of my top opportunity was to build a business out of wealth building. I literally wrote that down.
Awesome.
And then, just trying to use my strengths for how I could get there. And so the purpose of this company, for me is to really give back to people and really have an impact and take all of these learnings that I've had, right, on my personal growth, personally as well as professionally, and also, from a wealth standpoint. I mean, all these alternative things that aren't taught anywhere. They're not taught in school. It took so long to learn that. So I'm trying to really, encapsulate that and use my high follow through and systematic approach to be able to kind of articulate that in a way that people can actually take action.
Yeah. And so Dave, I have a question for you because it all sounds, I've described what you described, all sounds easy, but do you feel a great sense of responsibility when you're
100%?
Yeah.
Even, and it grows even every day, it grows even more and more.
Yeah. And so I just want to get across is that as we get to do this, we actually take on more responsibility, and we actually you have to really appreciate the role that we play in other people's lives. And I can talk about a number of things, but one that I would go back to is right after 9/11. And I coached 2 days later, and people drove up to Toronto and came across the border, everything else. And then we're still kind of in shock. And then I actually coached about 10 days later. And it was right at that point that how I realized how important coming to Strategic Coach was for all of our clients. And I said, holy smokes, talk about magnifying what it meant to be there and be in the front of the room. It wasn't just standing up there. It wasn't just delivering that, but the role that we played. And since that point in time, which is now more than 20 years, is just really appreciating that as we move to having our freedoms, we also then take on a great deal more responsibility because of the impact that we have on other people's lives.
Yeah, totally agree with that. And it's interesting because, yes, looking back in my career, I mean, when I was 22, I was a new second lieutenant in the Marine Corps. I had 42 people working for me, and I had millions of dollars of equipment that I was responsible for, was in combat situation. And I thought that was, the ultimate in terms of, responsibility and everything. But now, I look at it now, and yes, I have 4 kids, a family of 6 that I'm responsible for, but just feel very privileged to be able to take on people's precious capital that they're investing into our opportunities. So even, more responsibility to protect and preserve that and grow that, and then help to provide value for them as well.
Well, you just demonstrated what we talked about earlier, looking at our history and say, so what you learned at 22 and realizing what was important, the lives of 42 people in a combat situation, with all the money and the capital were there, which would have been beyond our own means at any point that time. You learned that piece, it still sticks with you, 25 plus years later. And so you kind of go, wow. And you've carried that with you, Dave. You've carried that with you. You carried with you that sense of responsibility at 22, which a lot of young men today at 22 don't have, by the way. Right. They don't see that. Maybe we protected them too much, as I see. But other than that, I see that that's what's really important. And you've been able to carry that with you even into the world of wealth management and wealth planning, even though those two worlds seem to be completely apart. But you brought together in your brain and your head to be able to make that a real much more complete package. And I hope other people can do that too. I hope they can really go back and appreciate their lives for what they've done and accomplished, not for all the other things that might have happened, but the things they did do, and bring that together so they can really be the best person, be their best self, I guess is the best way to put that.
For sure. Gary, if you could just give one piece of advice to listeners about their trajectory in life, what would it be?
My advice would be that you're going to go through life, you're going to make what is perceived as mistakes, but we have to learn. And I ask that when you're learning, you take note of how you feel. You take note of what's worked for you and what hasn't worked for you, and continue to refine your path down the direction that is working. Because what's working and the good feedback that you get is what other people value about you. And I believe that's what we're here. We're here in this world to make it a better place as best we can. And so we can also serve our own purposes by serving the purpose of other people. And so just pay attention to your journey, no matter what age you are, no matter what you've been through, but enjoy that journey as well.
Great, great. Gary, how can folks, if they want to connect with you, follow you, reach out, any places they can find you?
Yeah, that'd be great. The place that they can follow me is I do have a podcast like you. It's called Clarity Generates Confidence. It's certainly on Spotify and Apple, Google, and our website at www.gcpindustrial.com. You can find the information there. Like you, Dave, I have another book that'll be coming out later this year, and it's called From Hindsight to Foresight: What We've Learned in the Last 20 Years that we can apply to the next 20 years. A lot of the simple things that we've been talking about here I think have been encapsulated in just a short read, hour and a half read. And the other place that I really recommend that both of us talk about is get to Strategic Coach. So strategiccoach.com. There are a lot of resources at Strategic Coach. There are a number of podcasts that mine will also be up there too as they get it organized, along with Dan Sullivan, the number of ones that he does. And Dave, I do appreciate that you've also recommended a lot of people come to Coach program, but have them go check it out. There's a lot of online tools to be able to get in. There'll be online presentations for those who want to join the program. And as you know, over the last couple of years, we've not only have in-person workshops throughout the United States and Canada and the UK, but also virtual workshops that people can join. So those are the best places that I'd suggest that they follow, find me and find what you've been passionate about in your life for the last few years.
Awesome. Gary, thanks so much for coming on the show today. Really grateful and fun being in the role reversal and getting to ask you some good questions.
Yeah, it's different for me, but I loved it. Thank you very much. I hopefully that we've created some value for your audience, Dave. Thank you.
Thanks, Gary.